The tattoos on his neck told stories of power. The wheelchair told a different story, one of survival. But it was the third story, the one nobody saw coming, that changed everything. She thought leaving him broken in that hospital bed was the smartest move she'd ever made. After all, what's a paralyzed man worth to a woman who only loved what he could buy her? 6 months. That's how long it took for her to realize she'd made a mistake. But when she came back, designer heels clicking on marble floors, ready to reclaim what she thought was hers, she found him standing, not alone. And the woman beside him, she wasn't wearing diamonds. She wasn't wearing silk. But she was wearing something his ex-wife never could. His ring. Some betrayals end in regret. This one ended in front of 200 witnesses. If you're listening right now, help me prove my mother wrong. She said this channel would never reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this, stories about regret, redemption, and the consequences of our choices, deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our powerful stories. Give this video a like if you're already hooked by what you just heard. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Africa, Canada, Australia. We love connecting with our global family. And please share this video with friends and family who believe in second chances and facing the truth. Your support helps us create more incredible content that touches hearts. Now, let's continue this emotional journey. The crash happened at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Flight 392 from Tokyo to Seoul never made it home. The plane split apart over the East Sea, taking 137 souls with it. Kang Min-Jae, the most feared Mafia boss in Seoul, wasn't supposed to be one of the survivors, but fate had other plans. When they pulled him from the wreckage, his legs were crushed beneath twisted metal, his chest covered in blood, those infamous dragon tattoos on his neck barely visible through the ash and debris. The same tattoos that made grown men look away in fear now meant nothing in the face of death. The paramedics didn't care that he controlled half of Seoul's underground empire, or that his name made politicians nervous. They just saw another broken man who needed saving. The doctors at Seoul National University Hospital gave him 48 hours to live. Min-Jae, the Mafia boss who'd survived 3 assassination attempts, made it through the first night out of pure spite. Min-Jae woke up 3 days later in the ICU, machines beeping around him like a symphony of survival. His vision was blurred, his throat raw from the breathing tube they'd only just removed. The Mafia boss who once commanded rooms with a single glance now couldn't even sit up without help. The first thing he tried to do was move his legs. Nothing. Panic clawed at his chest as he tried again, commanding his body to obey the way his men obeyed his orders. Still nothing. A nurse rushed over, her hands gentle but firm on his shoulders, pushing him back down onto the bed. "Mr. Kang, please don't move. You've been through major trauma. Your spine was severely injured in the crash." Her voice was calm, professional, but he could hear the pity underneath. Min-Jae, who built an empire on fear and respect, hated pity more than he hated weakness. He grabbed her wrist, his grip still strong despite everything, his dark eyes burning into hers. "My legs," he growled, his voice like gravel. "Why can't I feel my legs?" Dr. Kim Sung-ho entered the room an hour later with a tablet and a carefully practiced expression of clinical sympathy. He was one of the best neurosurgeons in South Korea, and he'd operated on everyone from celebrities to politicians. But Kang Min-Jae's reputation preceded him, and the doctor chose his words very carefully. "Mr. Kang," he began, pulling up a chair beside the bed, "the impact caused severe damage to your lumbar spine. You have what we call paraplegia, paralysis of the lower body." Min-Jae's jaw tightened, the muscles in his tattooed neck flexing. The dragon tattoo seemed to coil with tension. The doctor continued, his voice steady. "However, I want you to understand something important. This isn't necessarily permanent. The swelling around your spinal cord is significant right now, but with aggressive treatment, physical therapy, and time, there's a genuine possibility you'll walk again." Min-Jae's eyes narrowed dangerously. "How long?" The doctor hesitated. "Best case scenario? 6 months to a year. But Mr. Kang, you have to commit to the recovery process completely. That's when he saw her for the first time. Zara Williams moved through the ICU with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd seen too much death to be rattled by it. She was a night shift nurse, and she'd been assigned to the notorious Mafia boss's case because none of the other Korean nurses wanted to deal with him. Word already spread about the tattooed gangster in room 304 who'd grabbed Nurse Park's wrist and made her cry. Zara didn't scare easily. She'd grown up in Atlanta, put herself through nursing school while working 2 jobs, and had come to Seoul on a medical exchange program 3 years ago. She'd stayed because she loved the work, loved the challenge. When she walked into Kang Min-Jae's room that first night, he was staring at the ceiling, his face carved from stone. She'd been briefed about who he was, a dangerous man, a criminal, someone to be cautious around. But she didn't flinch at the tattoos or the scar above his eyebrow. She just checked his vitals and adjusted his floor without saying a word. "You're new," the Mafia boss said, his voice cutting through the silence. Zara glanced at him, her warm brown eyes meeting his cold stare without wavering. "To you, maybe. I've been here 3 years." She made a note on his chart, her handwriting neat and precise. Min-Jae studied her, taking in the natural hair pulled back in professional bun, the absence of makeup, the simple scrubs that somehow looked dignified on her. He was used to people trembling in his presence, used to fear and respect. This woman showed neither. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked. It was a genuine question. Most people took one look at the tattoos, heard his name whispered in corridors, and kept their distance. Zara set the chart down and turned to face him fully. "Because you're in a hospital bed with a broken spine, Mr. Kang, and I've got 3 brothers back home bigger than you. Should I be afraid?" There was no challenge in her voice, just honest curiosity. For the first time in days, the infamous Kang Min-Jae almost smiled. But reality came crashing back the next morning when his wife finally showed up. Park Ji-Hye swept into the hospital room like she was walking a runway, her Chanel perfume announcing her arrival before she even entered. She was stunning in the way expensive things are stunning, polished, perfect, and utterly cold. Her long black hair fell in manufactured waves. Her skin was flawless from countless dermatology appointments Min-Jae had paid for, and her designer dress probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd married the powerful Mafia boss 5 years ago, knowing exactly what he was and loving what he could provide. She stopped at the foot of his bed, her eyes scanning his broken body, with an expression Min-Jae couldn't quite read. Was it disgust? Disappointment? She pulled out her phone, checked something, then looked at him again. "The doctors say you might walk again," she said, her voice flat. Not a question, not concern, just a statement. Min-Jae watched her carefully. "In 6 months to a year, maybe sooner." Ji-Hye's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. She walked around the bed, her heels clicking on the tile floor, and sat in the chair Dr. Kim had occupied earlier. She didn't reach for her husband's hand, didn't touch him at all. "Min-Jae, we need to talk about practical matters. The business can't run itself, and with you in here..." She trailed off, waving a manicured hand vaguely at the hospital equipment. "I've been in contact with your accountants and lawyers. We need to make sure everything is properly managed while you recover." There it was. Not "how are you feeling?" or "I was so worried," or even "I'm glad you're alive." Just business. Just money. Min-Jae had known what Ji-Hye was when he married her. She'd been a hostess in an exclusive club in Gangnam, beautiful and ambitious, and he'd been powerful enough to think that was enough. The Mafia boss who could read people like books had somehow missed the most obvious chapter in hers. Now, lying in this hospital bed, paralyzed and vulnerable, he saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't his wife. She was an investment that had stopped paying dividends. "There's something else," Ji-Hye continued, her eyes fixed on her phone screen instead of her husband's face. "The penthouse is too big for just me to maintain, and with the medical bills piling up, I think we should consider selling some properties. Maybe the villa in Jeju, and that ridiculous collection of cars you have, the Bentley, the Mercedes Maybach. We could liquidate those assets and..." "No!" The Mafia boss's voice cut through her financial planning, like a blade. Ji-Hye finally looked up, irritation flashing across her perfect features. No, Min-Jae, be reasonable. You're going to be in physical therapy for months. We need to be smart about this. He stared at her, really seeing her now. The designer clothes he'd paid for, the diamond earrings he'd bought for their anniversary, the luxury lifestyle she built entirely on his empire. Get out, he said quietly, but there was danger in that quietness. The kind of danger that used to make his enemies disappear. Ji-Hye blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Excuse me. I said get out. Come back when you remember you're supposed to be my wife, not my accountant. Ji-Hye stood up, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. She grabbed her designer purse, the one with the interlocking C's that cost more than a used car. Fine. You want to be difficult? You lie here and feel sorry for yourself. I have actual responsibilities to handle. She turned on her heel and stormed toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Without turning back, she said something that cut deeper than any knife wound Min-Jae had ever taken in his Mafia career. My mother always told me I should have married a normal businessman. At least they don't end up in wheelchairs. The words hung in the air like poison. Then she was gone, leaving only the fading scent of expensive perfume and the sound of heels clicking down the hallway. The Mafia boss who'd never backed down from a fight, who'd built his empire with blood and strategy, closed his eyes. His hands gripped the bed rails, so tightly his knuckles turned white. In his old life, if someone had disrespected him like that, there would have been swift and brutal consequences. But in this bed, with these dead legs, Kang Min-Jae was powerless for the first time in his adult life. That's when he heard the gentle knock on the door. Zara entered, carrying a tray with medication and a cup of water. She must have passed Ji-Hye in the hallway, must have heard at least some of that vicious conversation. But her face showed nothing but professional calm. She set the tray down on the bedside table and began preparing his medication with practiced efficiency. Your wife seems nice, she said, her tone completely neutral. Despite everything, despite the pain, the humiliation, the rage, the Mafia boss let out a harsh laugh. She's not. Zara handed him 2 pills and the water cup, her warm fingers briefly brushing against his cold ones. That's between you and her. I'm just here to make sure you don't die from infection or blood clots. She paused, then added quietly, meeting his eyes directly. But for what it's worth, Mr. Kang, I've seen a lot of people in hospital beds. I've seen how their families react. Some people rise to the occasion. Some people... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Min-Jae took the medication, and for the first time since waking up paralyzed, he felt something other than anger or despair. He felt seen, not as the feared Mafia boss, just as a man. The weeks that followed were hell. Not the kind of hell Kang Min-Jae was used to, the hell of gang wars, police raids, or rival families trying to take his territory. This was a different kind of torture. Physical therapy sessions that left him drenched in sweat and trembling with exhaustion. Learning to transfer himself from bed to wheelchair without help because his pride wouldn't let him call for assistance every time. The humiliation of needing help with the most basic human functions. But through it all, there was Zara. She worked the night shift, which meant she was there during his worst moments. The nights when phantom pain shot through his dead legs and he wanted to scream. The nights when despair threatened to swallow him whole. She never offered empty encouragement or false hope. She just showed up, did her job with quiet competence, and treated him like a human being instead of a dangerous criminal or a broken victim. One night, 3 weeks after the crash, she found him try to do push-ups on the hospital floor at 2 a.m., his arms shaking with effort, sweat dripping onto the cold tiles. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, setting down the medication tray. The Mafia boss didn't stop, didn't look up. "If my legs don't work, then the rest of me better be strong enough to compensate." His voice was strained, each word punctuated by another push-up. Zara watched him for a moment, then grabbed a towel and knelt beside him. "You're going to tear your stitches and end up back in surgery. Is that what you want?" Min-Jae finally stopped, his arms giving out. He collapsed onto his chest, breathing hard. "What I want is to walk again." What I want is to not be useless. The vulnerability in his voice surprised them both. Zara sat back on her heels, the towel still in her hands. Mr. Kang, you survived a plane crash that killed 137 people. Your spine is healing. The doctor said you can walk again, and I've seen Dr. Kim's success rate. But you have to be smart about this. Strength without strategy is just destruction. She paused. I thought a man in your line of work would understand that. Min-Jae turned his head to look at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. She wasn't judging him. She was challenging him. And strangely, that felt like respect. Help me back to the bed, he said quietly. It was the first time he'd asked instead of demanded. Zara didn't make a big deal of it. She just moved into position, and together they got him back into the wheelchair, then onto the bed. As she adjusted his pillows, Min-Jae asked, Why are you still here? In Seoul, after everything. Zara pulled the blanket over his legs, the legs that couldn't feel it, and considered the question. My younger brother Marcus wanted to visit me here. He'd never been outside of Georgia, never traveled internationally. So he saved up for months, planned this big trip. He was going to spend 2 weeks in Tokyo first, then take Flight 392 to Seoul to stay with me. Her voice was steady, but Min-Jae heard something crack beneath it. I was supposed to pick him up from Incheon Airport that night. I had his favorite snacks ready, made up the guest room in my apartment. She finally looked at Min-Jae, and he saw it in her eyes. The same crash, the same flight. Marcus Williams, 24 years old, seat 17C. He died instantly, they said. Didn't suffer. The words hung between them like a bridge made of shared grief. I stayed in Seoul because going home and explaining to my mother why I couldn't save him. The Mafia boss, who'd order men killed without losing sleep, felt something crack in his chest. Zara, don't, she interrupted gently. Don't apologize for surviving. That's not how this works. She picked up the medication tray, her professional mask sliding back into place. I stayed in Seoul because going home meant facing my mother's empty eyes, meant walking into Marcus's room and seeing everything exactly as he left it. Here, I can do something useful. I can save the people who made it when my brother didn't. She headed for the door, then paused. Get some rest, Mr. Kang. Real rest, not push-ups at 2 a.m. You want to walk again? Then trust the process. And trust me, after she left, Min-Jae stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. They were both survivors of the same tragedy, both drowning in different ways. But she'd thrown him a lifeline without even realizing it. For the first time since the crash, he thought about someone other than himself. He thought about Zara, working through her grief by caring for broken strangers, including him. The dangerous Mafia boss made a decision that night. He would walk again, not just for himself, but to prove that her brother's death and the deaths of all those people hadn't destroyed everyone touched by that flight. Ji-Hye came back 2 days later, but everything had changed. She walked into his hospital room wearing a different designer outfit, her hair freshly styled, her nails perfectly manicured. Min-Jae was in his wheelchair by the window, working with resistance bands Zara had brought him. His wife didn't notice the sweat on his face or the determination in his eyes. She just launched into what she'd clearly rehearsed. Min-Jae, I've been thinking, about us, about our future. She sat on the edge of his bed, crossing her legs elegantly. This situation isn't working. You need full-time care, and I'm not a nurse. I'm your wife, and I have responsibilities to the lifestyle we built together. The Mafia boss set down the resistance band slowly. What are you saying, Ji-Hye? She had the decency to look away. I'm saying that maybe we should consider a separation, just temporarily, until you're back on your feet. I've already spoken to Attorney Lee about the paperwork. We can divide the assets fairly, and once you recover, we can revisit. You want a divorce? It wasn't a question. Ji-Hye's mask slipped slightly. I want to be realistic. Look at you, Min-Jae. You're in a wheelchair. The doctors say maybe you'll walk, maybe you won't. I can't put my life on hold for maybe. The Mafia boss who built an empire on reading people finally saw his wife's true face. Not the beautiful mask she wore in public, But the calculating opportunist underneath, you've already found someone else. Again, not a question. Ji-Hye's cheeks flushed, confirming everything. Choi Dae-young is a successful businessman. He's been very supportive during this difficult time. He understands what I'm going through. Min-Jae almost laughed at the audacity. Choi Dae-young, a real estate mogul who'd been trying to get into Min-Jae's business circles for years. Of course, his wife wasn't just leaving him. She was trading up, or so she thought. Fine, Min-Jae said calmly, wheeling himself back to face her directly. You want a divorce? We'll divorce. Attorney Lee can draw up the papers. You'll get half of everything in the marital accounts, as the law requires. Ji-Hye's eyes lit up with greedy satisfaction. She didn't know about the offshore accounts, the properties held under shell corporations, the liquid assets he'd hidden from everyone, including her. She thought she was taking half of everything. She was actually taking half of nothing that mattered. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, she said, standing up and smoothing her dress. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. This doesn't have to be ugly, Min-Jae. But it already was ugly. It had always been ugly. Min-Jae had just been too blinded by her beauty to see it. After Ji-Hye left, Min-Jae sat in his wheelchair and stared at his reflection in the window. The dragon tattoos on his neck seemed darker somehow, more prominent against his pale skin. He'd gotten them when he took over his father's organization at 25, each scale representing a battle fought, a territory won. Now they just reminded him of who he used to be. The door opened, and Zara came in for her evening rounds. She took one look at his face and knew something had happened. Your wife? She asked quietly, already checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. Soon to be ex-wife. She wants a divorce. Already has a replacement lined up. Zara moved around the room, but Min-Jae could see her processing this information. I'm sorry, she said finally. Are you? Min-Jae asked, his voice sharper than intended. Sorry, I mean, you barely know me. Zara paused in her work and turned to face him fully. Mr. Kang, in my line of work, you see people at their absolute worst and their absolute best. I've seen you at your worst, broken, angry, scared. But I've also seen you doing push-ups on the floor at 2 a.m. because you refuse to give up. So yeah, I'm sorry that your wife chose now to abandon you. But honestly, I think you dodged a bullet. The Mafia boss found himself smiling despite everything. A bullet would have been less painful. The divorce papers were filed within a week. Ji-Hye's lawyer was efficient, probably because she wanted this over with quickly, so she could move into Choi Dae-young's penthouse without guilt. Min-Jae signed everything without argument, watching his wife's signature already dried on the pages. She got the Gangnam apartment they'd shared, half the money in their joint accounts, several luxury cars, and a generous settlement. She thought she'd won the lottery. What she didn't know was that the Gangnam apartment had a second mortgage she'd have to assume. The joint accounts held less than 10% of his actual wealth, and the luxury cars were depreciating assets that would drain her maintenance budget within months. The real money, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the properties in Singapore and Dubai, the cryptocurrency wallets worth millions, the legitimate business fronts that generated steady income, all of that remained untouched, hidden behind layers of shell corporations and legal structures his wife had never bothered to understand. Kang Min-Jae hadn't survived in the Mafia world for 15 years by being careless with money. He'd survived by being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. 6 weeks after the crash, his divorce was finalized. Park Ji-Hye became his ex-wife, free to pursue her businessman. Min-Jae became officially single, apparently broke, and more motivated than ever. That's when he made Zara an offer she almost refused. He'd been released from the hospital with a strict physical therapy regimen and orders to continue treatment at home. I want to hire you as my private nurse, Min-Jae said on her last day at the hospital. They were in his room, and he was dressed in regular clothes for the first time in weeks, expensive black joggers and a fitted long-sleeve shirt that couldn't hide the upper body muscle he'd been building. The dragon tattoos peeked out from his collar. I'll pay you 3 times what the hospital pays, plus housing if you need it, and full benefits. Zara crossed her arms, studying him carefully. Why me? There are plenty of qualified private nurses in Seoul, Mr. Kang. Because you're not afraid of me. Because you push back when I'm being stupid. Because... He hesitated, then continued honestly. Because you understand what it's like to survive when you weren't sure you wanted to. I need someone who sees me as a person, not as a paycheck or a charity case or a dangerous criminal. I think you're that person. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Kang, I'll be honest with you. I don't need the money, but I also don't have anything else in Seoul except work and an empty apartment full of memories. So I'll take your offer, but not for the salary. I'll take it because I believe you actually want to get better. The Mafia boss moved into a different penthouse, one Ji-Hye had never known about. It was in Hanam-dong, overlooking the Han River with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that cost as much as the property itself. The decor was minimalist and modern, and most importantly, it was entirely wheelchair accessible. Wide doorways, roll-in shower, lower counters in the kitchen. Min-Jae had bought it years ago as a safe house, never imagining he'd actually live there. Zara moved into the spacious guest suite with its own bathroom and a balcony view of the city lights. The first morning, she woke up at 6 a.m. and found Min-Jae already awake in the living room. He converted part of it into a home gym, resistance bands hanging from a reinforced bar, free weights organized by size, a pull-up bar installed in the doorway. His upper body was already transforming, shoulders broadening, arms developing defined muscle, chest filling out. The dragon tattoo seemed to come alive with each movement, scales rippling across his sweat-slicked skin. "Good morning," she said, leaning against the doorframe with her coffee. 6 a.m. workouts? Seriously. Min-Jae finished a set of pull-ups before dropping back into his wheelchair, chest heaving. Dr. Kim said 6 months to a year. I'm giving myself 4. That means no days off. Zara shook her head, smiling despite herself. All right, Mafia boss. Let's see what you're really made of. The next 3 months became a routine of sweat, pain, and small victories. Every morning at 6 a.m., Min-Jae was already working when Zara emerged from her room. Pull-ups until his arms shook. Bench presses with increasing weight. Core exercises that made his abs burn. And through it all, the physical therapy sessions 3 times a week with Dr. Kim's recommended therapist. Zara watched him transform before her eyes. The broken man from the hospital bed was disappearing, replaced by someone harder, stronger, more determined. His upper body became a weapon, broad shoulders, defined arms, chest muscles that strained against his shirts. The dragon tattoos on his neck extended down to intricate designs across his chest and arms, and with his new physique, they looked more intimidating than ever. But it wasn't just physical. Something was changing between them, too. The way Zara would steady his wheelchair during transfers, her hands gentle but confident. The way Min-Jae started asking about her day, really listening to her answers. The nights when they'd sit on the balcony, talking about everything except the plane crash that had brought them together. It was subtle, unspoken, but undeniably there. A connection neither of them had expected. Then, on a Tuesday morning exactly 4 months after crash, it happened. Min-Jae was in his usual physical therapy session, working with the parallel bars. He'd been practicing standing with support for weeks now, his legs gradually regaining strength and sensation. Zara was there like always, standing close enough to catch him if he fell. All right, Mr. Kang, the therapist said, let's try taking a step today. Just one. Use the bars for support. Min-Jae gripped the bars, his knuckles white with effort. He'd been waiting for this moment, dreaming about it, pushing himself to the breaking point for it. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his right foot, moved it forward 6 inches. Then his left foot, another 6 inches. The therapist gasped. Zara's hand flew to her mouth. I'm walking, Min-Jae said, his voice thick with emotion he didn't bother hiding. Zara, I'm actually walking. He took another step, then another. His legs were shaking, his entire body trembled with the effort, but he was doing it. After 4 months in a wheelchair, after being told he might never walk again, Kang Min-Jae was walking. When he finally stopped, exhausted and overwhelmed, he turned to look at Zara. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, her professional composure completely shattered. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. Word spread quickly through Seoul's underground that the Mafia boss was back on his feet. Min-Jae's right-hand man, Yoon Tae-hyun, came to the penthouse a week later. He was a scarred, intimidating man in his 40s who'd been with Min-Jae's organization for 15 years. "Boss," Tae-hyun said, bowing slightly as Min-Jae walked into the living room without the wheelchair. "It's good to see you standing." They discussed business for an hour, the territories that had been held, the deals that needed Min-Jae's approval, the money that had kept flowing even in his absence. Then Tae-hyun's expression shifted to something uncomfortable. "There's something else, boss. Your ex-wife." Min-Jae's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "She's been spending money like crazy. That businessman she left you for, Choi Deung, he dumped her 3 weeks ago. Apparently, he was only interested in her connections to you, and once the divorce was finalized, she was worthless to him." Tae-hyun pulled out his phone, showing Min-Jae photos of Ji-Hye looking haggard. "Her designer clothes from months ago, leaving a pawn shop. She's broke. The apartment has 2 mortgages. The cars are being repossessed, and she's maxed out every credit card. Now she's asking around about you, about your finances, about whether you're really as broke as the divorce papers claimed." Min-Jae processed this information with cold satisfaction. "Let her dig. She won't find anything." He paused. "Actually, I have a better idea. I'm hosting a charity gala next month for the families of Flight 392 victims. Make sure Ji-Hye gets an invitation." Tae-hyun's scarred face split into a knowing grin. "Understood, boss." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Min-Jae contacted the families of crash victims, set up a foundation in Marcus Williams' name, and planned an event at the Grand Shilla Hotel's ballroom. Zara didn't know what he was planning, but she helped organize everything, her grief channeled into something productive. The night of the gala, Min-Jae stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, adjusting his custom-tailored black suit. It fit perfectly across his now muscular shoulders and chest. The white shirt underneath was crisp, the top button undone just enough to show a hint of the dragon tattoo on his collarbone. He looked powerful, healthy, and completely transformed from the broken man in the hospital bed. Zara knocked on his door, and when she entered, they both stopped. She was wearing a simple black dress, elegant without being flashy, her natural hair styled beautifully, minimal jewelry. She looked stunning. "You clean up nice, Mr. Kang," she said softly. He smiled. "So, do you, Zara? So, do you?" The ballroom of the Grand Shilla Hotel was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, 200 guests in formal wear, waiters circulating with champagne. Min-Jae had spared no expense. He saw Ji-Hye the moment she walked in, wearing a dress he recognized from their marriage, her hair styled to hide how thin it had gotten, her makeup heavy to conceal the stress on her face. She spotted him across the room and froze. He was standing, walking, healthy, and he wasn't alone. Zara stood beside him, and the way Min-Jae's hand rested protectively on her lower back said everything. Ji-Hye pushed through the crowd, desperation clear in her eyes. "Min-Jae," she breathed. You're walking. I'm so happy for you." Before he could respond, Min-Jae walked to the stage, microphone in hand. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to honor the 137 souls lost on Flight 392, including Marcus Williams, whose sister Zara is here with us." He gestured to her. "Zara taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to live. You have to honor those who didn't make it by being better than you were." Then he descended the stage, walked directly to Zara, and in front of 200 witnesses, dropped to one knee. "Zara Williams, you saved my life in more ways than one. Will you marry me?" The ballroom erupted. Zara said yes. And across the room, Ji-Hye's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor, her face a portrait of devastating regret. Some betrayals end in divorce. This one ended in a proposal. And Kang Min-Jae, the Mafia boss who'd survived a plane crash, walked out of that ballroom with the only woman who'd ever truly seen him. Not his money, not his power, just him.